Hello. Hi, Zobiar.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm Bernadine. How are you?
Oh, Bernadine. Oh, yes. I'm good, thank you. Bernadine, can you confirm that you can see and hear me and see and hear the jazz music and video?
Yes, I can hear it and see it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be back at 4. Hello, students, and welcome to ACCT 3323 MIS for Wednesday, December 1st. Welcome to December at 4 p.m. Atlantic time. How's everyone doing out there?
Pretty good.
Good. All right. You guys getting yourselves all organized and prepared for final exams? Or are you still finishing up a lot of end of term assignments?
I think
All right.
both.
Both, yeah. I think both probably as well. It's good if you can be doing both at the same time, prepping for your final while you get your assignments done. A lot of cases, doing the assignments are quite helpful because hopefully that content is going to be on the final exam the later you're in the semester. At least it would be from my perspective if I was doing that. All right, I got a couple of comments in the chat room. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so we got 18 here today. I think that number will grow in a little bit. I guess some people are spending time on their assignments instead of coming to class. Not necessarily the best thing to be doing at the end of the semester, okay? All right, but you get to decide how you want to manage your own courses. That's the luxury of being an adult. You get to decide what you want to do. All right, or most of the times anyways. All right, are there any questions off the top? Are there any students out there that have communicated with me, but you feel that I have not answered your question or haven't responded to you? Okay, if there's something that's outstanding, please email me and let me know. It's the end of term, so it's very busy here. And some things or emails may get overlooked or forgotten. So if you have anything, please just email me and let me know there's something that I've forgotten to do for you or with you or on your behalf. Okay. All right. So your IT project failure assignment should be graded by this Saturday. You still have an opportunity. Oh, and the systems development assignment is due this Saturday. So on Mondays, in Monday's class, I had suggested that maybe something you might want to do is read that assignment in advance of today's class so that you had an idea of what was expected, because today we are going to be covering the content that is related to that assignment. We're not going to be doing the assignment, but we're definitely going to be talking about some of the questions in terms of the pros and cons of the different ways that you might approach your systems development. You still have an opportunity to get bonus points on the SimNet. I understand that there's one person in this class, possibly two. And I know in the other MIS class, or one of them on campus, somebody has done the whole thing and got their black belt. And apparently it didn't take a ton of hours to get it done. So again, if you are Excel savvy already, this might be an easy way to earn some extra bonus points to get added to your final grade. All right, so again, I'm hoping to finish up most of our new content today and Monday. There may be a little bit of overrun on Monday into Wednesday. And then Wednesday, my intention is that we will sort of do a review and talk a little bit about final exam guidance and preparation next Wednesday. Okay, so let me share my screen here. Share screen. All right. So can you see getting the right system right?
Yep.
All right, good. All right, does anybody remember this slide? When was the last time we used it?
Last class.
Last Monday? All right, last month too, because today is December. All right. So what do you, last time that we talked about this, getting the right system right. So I also mentioned the last class is talking about how, the last couple of chapters are sort of interwoven in terms of, managing IT project risk, IT failure, systems development failure. And so we talked last class primarily all about on the left-hand side of this slide, getting the right system right, talking about, why are we looking for a new system and what are all of the different factors or decision variables, as they're called here, in terms of what we need to be considering if we are going to be looking at getting a new software application. Okay. So today what we're going to focus on is that we're going to look at acquiring or developing the new information system solution that we've determined that we've needed over here. Okay. We're going to be looking at a couple different, so there's two options. You can either have a new system developed in-house or you can outsource it. So we're going to look at the different options today in terms of considerations for in-house and for outsourcing. And I think that's what your project for Saturday is primarily about, is discussing pros and cons of the various methodologies of your solution options that you have available to you. Okay. All right. So first of all, let's just look at, if we're going to be designing or getting a new system, whatever way we're doing it, what we want to do is we want to look at attributes of a quality system, right? The slide looks like it's from the 70s, but it's just been copied and pasted and photocopied and scanned a few different times. All right, so the attributes of a quality system. What do we want in our system that we're going to be either developing or purchasing, or if we're purchasing, modifying it, etc. So one of the first things, of course, we want it to be usefulness. So the information produced by the system should be helping management in their decision making and help the users in their processing. Okay? So make sure that the system is going to be useful. What are the economies? So cost benefit analysis. Are the benefits of the system going to exceed the cost of the actual system itself? They better be, okay? Because you shouldn't be entering into a new system unless you understand that the benefits are greater. You need a return on investment if you're going to be spending all this time and money on a new application. Okay? The system must be reliable. So once you need to make sure the system is going to be able to produce any information reports accurately and completely, and that the system is also reliable in terms of being able to be available at all times when it is deemed necessary by the users of the application. Okay. You also want to consider timeliness. Okay, so most applications these days are real time. So with order entries, with banking, etc., most of the applications are real time. So timeliness isn't as big a factor as it used to be. There was a time when information got entered into one system. It may still be a time actually at some companies. But sometimes in a lot of the older days, I'll say, and when I say older, I only mean 15 to 20 years ago, you would have data keyed into one system and then process a report, and then it would go to another department, and they would key some of that information in and produce another report, and then it would go to another department. So you want to make sure that your system, in terms of real time, is going to be able to produce any reports. You want to be able to press a button at any time of the day and be able to produce an up-to-date report. Now, there are still some applications that need to be, or databases that need to be updating some of their processes overnight. So some applications, it's not possible until the next day, until there does like an update overnight in order to be able to get some reporting the next day. Yeah. All right, you want to make sure that whoever's providing the service, if it's a vendor outside, that they have courteous and efficient customer service staff that are going to be able to address any of the issues you might be having with an application. Okay. The capacity, the system's got to have sufficient capacity to be able to handle peak periods. So in the time of year like this, in terms of like the holiday or Christmas season, you know, this is normally a peak buying season, people gift giving, and you want to make sure that your applications are going to be able to process a higher peak or a higher volume of orders. Even, for example, like Air Canada and WestJet, if you go in, if you get one of those notifications, say, hey, we got a seat sale. If you go in, a lot of times they can't handle the volume, their applications, and that little plane is going around and around. Okay, so that shows you that their application actually can't manage high peaks. And so their marketing campaigns, while they are, let's say, vigorous and attractive, sometimes when you go in to actually like buy a seat or book a ticket, it takes a very long time for the process to happen. So their application doesn't really have the capacity to manage the demand at the time of their marketing efforts, and they really need to get that figured out. Okay. All right. So ease of use. You want the system to be user friendly. You want it to be intuitive. Maybe, you know, you have color codings, et cetera, on certain fields to make sure that you know, color coding is really useful in terms of visual signals to users of the system. And also, if you're inquiring on systems, there's specific pieces of information you might want that application to provide to you, like such as the total or something. And so maybe having it highlighted would be quite useful, because it will bring your eye right to that field on the screen. Okay. You want to make sure the software application is going to have lots of flexibility. Okay, so it needs to make sure that the operating system is going to be able to manage the capacity or the demands of the software application. So it needs to make sure that if you have an application, we talked about this last class, I think, that, you know, a lot of time, so it was in the one of the cases, the mini cases, about the new application that they were buying was going to require a new operating system the company hadn't used before. Okay, so if you also have to update your operating system, you want to make sure that the application is going to have flexibility on that system. The next one is tractability. Okay, I actually had to look this up a few days ago. What is tractability? Let's see if I left it up there. No, I didn't leave it up. All right, doesn't matter. But in terms of the system, computer system, so the tractability means that the system needs to be designed so it's easily understood by the users and designers. So if you have an application, let's say you're maybe doing it in-house, what are some things that you might want to do as a designer to be able to ensure that that application or the application processes are going to be easily understood by maybe the next person or someone else who's working on the project? What's one of the things that would be important to do? And it's the one thing that most designers and developers don't like doing. Any guesses?
Documenting, maybe?
Documenting, yes. All right. When I used to be a computer programmer, it was the least liked thing that anybody wanted to do. But actually, documentation is probably one of the most critical things, because like people leave organizations, you know, they move on to somewhere else, or they get promoted and move in other departments. So documentation is one of the most important aspects of systems development, so that you know, any other user or systems developer, programmer, etc., are able to follow and understand your flowcharts or the written documentation for the systems analysis and design portion of the application. Okay. The other thing you want to make sure is that it's the auditability. Auditability, a 6-syllable word, can be maximized. So basically what that means is that you want the auditability. So if you want audits to be done, like even in internal controls, you want to make sure that there are checks and balances that are included in the development of the system, so that information is easily auditable. And that could be something as simple as something that we call hash totals. that reconciles things that you add up versus what the computer system is adding. And then the last thing, of course, is security. So you want to make sure that whatever the application is, that it has the ability to ensure that that you're going to have the ability to set up. I was trying to think of the credentials, user credentials, so that you have like valid passwords. Certain parts of different systems also, you might not want access to certain users. You may only want them to see certain items. So you need to make sure that it also has the flexibility to allow only certain features to be seen. Or, for example, maybe editing certain bits of data. You only want certain people also working on those functions in the application. Right. All right, so those were some of the attributes of a quality system that you look for when you're thinking about either designing it in-house or looking for maybe to purchase it outside. Okay, so again, your two options are you either do it inside your own company or you do it outside. So let's look at a couple of the in-house options up here. Who can tell me what SDLC stands for, the acronym?
Software development lifecycle.
Okay, that's a good stab at it. Okay, so the only word is systems. Okay, so SDLC stands for Systems Development Life Cycle. Right. Okay, so if you didn't answer that question, I think maybe you didn't read page 370, which is the very first page in chapter 9. Okay, I'm teasing you, but yeah, so everybody should have known what SDLC stood for. It's a little test there, right? All right, so SDLC is a very, I would say, antiquated. It was the way that we used to do computer programming back in the 80s and 90s. It is an older or a traditional system of developing software applications. Okay, as it says here, it's the oldest method for building information systems. It has a phased approach, so it's what we call the waterfall approach. You can probably tell why it's called the waterfall approach, because the way that each of the steps are done, there's a phased approach with formal stages in each one, and you don't move on to the next one until the previous one is done. Okay. So each of the stages are developed or divided into formal stages. And there's also a formal division of labor, if you will, between each of these stages. So, I think I told you before when I was worked at CIBC on the chip and pin project, okay, all of these various processes or parts of the systems development lifecycle included different groups of people. Okay, so none of the programmers were testing. You don't want programmers testing, because if they're testing their own programming, what do you think they might do? Right, they might overlook some of the testing, and you don't want them writing the test scripts for any of the programs. Okay. Now, what is the one thing that you don't see in this process, this older systems development lifecycle process of developing a system?
The planning stage?
Planning stage, okay. So this is going to be up here in the systems analysis. So Tara, let's build on that point a bit. So who do you think was involved in the planning stage up here when the systems analysis was being determined? Who do you think some of the players might have been? Or anyone else?
Like upper management type thing?
Yep, they would have been involved. Thank you. Anyone else? Who else might have been involved in helping the systems analysis part? Begins with U, not YOU. Okay, so what is not showing here is any of the users along the way. So the most important people in a lot of software application development or new software applications are involving the users. So in most modern methods now with software application development or determining what your needs are inside of an organization is including the users in all of the steps along the way. Okay, so you don't really see this often much anymore. Most times that you see it is when it's a very large scale project and the upper management or the executive have decided that they want to implement a system or develop a new system, and they don't involve the users along every step of the way because it's kind of like their way or the highway. They want to make this application and there isn't any option. Okay, that is not a very effective or efficient way of systems development. So that's why you don't see this methodology employed much anymore. But you still might see it in large organizations that want to implement very big software applications. Okay. All right. All right. So a couple of points there. Emphasizes formal specifications and paperwork. Again, used for developing large complex systems requiring tight controls. So let's look at a couple of the advantages and disadvantages of the systems lifecycle. Okay. So again, as I just mentioned, the advantages, it is necessary for large complex systems and projects. Excuse me, but there are some of the disadvantages, right? So it's slow and expensive because if you think about it, all of this has to happen first before it moves on to the next phase, okay? All of this has to happen before it moves on to the next phase. The other thing about this kind of methodology is that there's very little opportunity for changes or enhancements or user involvement and to come back and maybe make some amendments to the application. So if you get all the systems analysis done here in the design, once everything is kind of programmed, it's hard to come back to either the design or the analysis phase to make some changes in the application because if all the programming is done and we don't find out until something in the testing where there's some issues and we might get users involved, it's hard to go back all the way here and move through these processes again. All right. So there we go. Slow and expensive, discourages changes. And again, yeah, there's lots of massive paperwork to manage. And maybe not so much paperwork anymore, but in terms of documentation. But this is paper, but hopefully not everything gets printed so much anymore. Okay. All right, let's look at the next element, looking at here, another one. Let's look at some prototyping, okay? So what does prototyping look like? All right, so prototyping kind of, this is a schematic of how prototyping works. So prototyping is something, again, that is done in-house. So there's some kind of a need that it has been identified by one or more users, but not a lot of users. Okay, so prototyping is a little more specific. It's usually generally used for smaller number of users, not a whole organization. It might even be used for like one department or some of the users within a department for a specific requirement that they have. Okay. So the first thing that happens is that you have to identify the needs of the user, then to developing a working prototype. Now, this could be in a software application that already exists, or it could be using software language that some of your in-house programmers use. But generally, it's probably mostly like a very small aspect or small application that they want to do. So then you use the prototype, the users look at it and they see, okay, is it doing what I wanted? Maybe am I getting the inquiry information that I was hoping for, or am I getting the reports that I needed? And if they're not getting what they want, basically the developers will revise and enhance the prototype and come back and use and do it again. And this iteration will continue to happen until the user is satisfied and they get an operational prototype that they're happy with, that they're going to be able to use inside of the organization. Okay. So 4-step process. Let's see here. Okay, let's just look at a couple of the advantages of prototyping. So it is rapid and expensive, okay, because usually it's very small and tiny. It's useful when requirements are uncertain or when the end user interface is important. So the end user obviously is a person who wants the information or the reporting. Also too, with prototyping, it promotes a high degree of user participation. So when you have a high degree of user participation, more likely the outcome is going to be higher user satisfaction. And you're also going to most likely have less changes or modifications or enhancements later because the user has had such high involvement. Okay? All right, again, some of the disadvantage of this system, again, it's not appropriate for large or complex systems. And also too, when you're doing prototyping, a lot of times the documentation isn't as robust, mostly because it's a smaller type of application, but also too, there's only a few users and maybe 1 or 2 developers or programmers that might be involved in the prototyping. So there's less requirements in terms of the size of that application in terms of requiring a lot of documentation. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. I want to come back here. Okay, so let's go look at Agile and end user computing. Any questions so far? Okay, so excuse me. So rapid application development, RAD and JAD. So those acronyms that you saw up in that schematic, the first one, getting the right system right. Excuse me, I have to cough. Just mute for a second.
You actually just muted yourself now.
Oh, did I cough live? Sorry about that. Okay, now I've unmuted. Thank you, Tara. Sorry about that. All right, so then we're kind of talking about the rapid application, then we're just moving on to rapid application development. So RAD and JAD are basically versions of prototyping. I wouldn't worry too much about these. It's just a, talking about creating workable systems in a very short time. And then of course the end users and the specialists are working together. So these are 2 of the characteristics that I just described with regards to the prototyping. So there's a few acronyms in terms of, hey, let's use a RAD methodology. So RAD methodology is just one of the ways of doing prototyping. JAD is another methodology, if you will, or a methodology that's used inside of prototyping. Okay. Now let's look at the end user development. Okay. Have any of you been involved in your own if you've been working in an organization, have you would you describe yourself as being an end user, or have you been an end user developer? Okay. Has anybody out there used Excel in their workplace?
Very frequently.
Frequently. Anyone else?
Oh, all the time.
Patrick? Anyone else? Anyone else have used Excel?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We got 3 people. All right. So you 3 people that have said that you have used Excel in the workplace, you are an end user developer. Okay. So the mere fact that you're actually using Excel means that you have been an end user developer, because you've been using Excel to either be able to generate some type of reports or gather together some kind of information to produce a report for yourself or for your manager or for your colleagues. All right. Now, has anybody ever got an Excel sheet from someone else that you didn't develop, that someone else did or someone else created?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
What was that like? What did you think when you opened it and you tried to use it?
I've had multiple, and it's ranged from fairly straightforward to completely incomprehensible.
All right. Okay. So thanks for that, Kyle. Anybody else opened up an Excel or got an Excel model or from another coworker and tried to use it?
I had to. I had like a huge amount of data that I had to kind of sort to make it
Right.
easy to read.
Okay. Now, did someone give you the Excel spreadsheet and you went to use it?
Yeah,
Okay.
like my boss gave me it.
Okay. So what did you think when you opened it and you tried to use it?
It was like not really readable. Like it
Okay. Your
wasn't.
boss is not in the class.
No, it was like really hard to understand.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So thank you for those contributions, Kyle and Maria. So this is one of the issues within end user development. So when you are the end user developer, okay, basically you are developing your own reporting or even your own application, or you're using an application to be able to produce an end user requirement. Okay. Now, there are so many large corporations out there who still produce their monthly financial statements using Excel, not using their application. They may download the data from the application or use structured query language or some other fourth generation language to retrieve that information and then produce their financial statements from that extraction. Okay? Now, what do you think some of the risks are in doing that? Trying to pull using SQL or some other method of extracting data from your databases to produce, say, financial statements or other reports. What are some of the risks? I'm not telling you them all.
There might be errors in the data, so running any of the queries might give you false results.
Yep, there may be errors in the data. Okay. Usually end users are not experts in the data, and also they may not be aware of issues in the system because they're not part of the process when there are application errors or problems, or if there have been data issues with data inputting or with the veracity or with the possible dirty data that might be inputted into a system. Okay. So if you're getting dirty data or if you're getting databases that are not uniform, what might happen with that data that you pull in? And say in Maria, in your example, or using Maria's example, what potentially could happen if you're just unwittingly pulling in data because that's what that end user application does? How useful do you think the report is if there's bad data in it?
It's actually harmful at that point.
Yeah. All right. Maria, you had your own self unmuted?
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like at the beginning when we talked about garbage going in is gonna be garbage coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it can be unreliable. So if you're an end user and you're just pulling data, or if someone gives you an application or an Excel spreadsheet, or I think I got it right this time. I'm going to actually have a Halls while I am speaking so I don't get any dry mouth again. All right. Hopefully I can talk with it. All right, I was putting this side of my cheek. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what these risks might mean. Okay, so if you're relying on a Excel application to download data from databases to produce your monthly financial statements, and there are errors in that data, what is that going to do to your financial statements? Or potentially do?
They're not going to be accurate.
They're not going to be accurate. That is correct. Okay. What
Yeah.
else?
Well, that can seriously cause your shareholders to back out of your organization.
Yep. So there's serious knock-on impacts, right? So if you're an end user and you're pulling down data and you really don't know what you're doing because you're not an SQL expert, but someone's giving you this spreadsheet and say, hey, just press this button, this macro will take care of everything. And you just go with it because, this is what you've been told to do. So in Maria's example, her boss gave her this spreadsheet and, basically is asking her to run with it. Okay, so one of the things you have to be very careful of when you're being the end user, and if you're creating your own app, if you're getting applications from somebody else or systems, you want to make sure that you understand and that you test it and sort of like reconcile that maybe back to extracting the data on your own or with somebody else who might be able to do an SQL for you. Or you should also probably state your confidence level about using those kinds of applications when it comes to not having the expertise, even though you've been asked to do it. Because if your confidence level is low and you don't have the necessary skills, then the risk of having an error is even greater. Okay. All right. Okay, so what else could happen? Let's say you're the end user again. Okay, so you only know what you know, and I think I just touched on this a little bit, but what if you're being asked to like develop a report, extracting some data, maybe using Excel or using Access? What are you limited by? Okay, so do you know all the tools and applications that are out there available in the market to be able to facilitate the requirements that have been asked of you? Probably not. Do you know how many accounting applications there are out in there in the market?
A lot.
Yeah, like thousands. All right. So do you know them all?
No.
Probably not. All right. I know maybe I can get to 10. Okay. Myself. All right. So if you don't know what's available out there, there's a potential that you may not know the right tool to do the job or the application that's being, or the requirements that are being asked of you. Okay. So if you don't know this, then what we call this is an inherent bias. So if you don't know what you don't know, you're going to have an inherent bias in terms of the reports that you might be producing, or the data that you might be extracting from databases to be able to produce your reports that you're going to be generating for your bosses or for your colleagues. Okay. Now, I think that in a lot of workplaces, Excel is used still a lot to be able to produce these different kinds of reports, as I was alluding to, like financial statements or management reports, that kind of thing. How much time do you think management wants their employees to be spending on developing their own end user applications or end user requirements besides the job that they actually have to do?
Preferably none, I assume.
Preferably none. And why might that be important, that you would like to minimize the end user developing?
Because it takes away from the time actually, spent making reports and that sort of thing.
Yep. Thank you. And what else out there might you think and alluding to earlier when I asked you guys about taking someone else's spreadsheet, what else could that cause a problem in the organization? If each user is developing their own applications or uses using Excel or Access or some other fourth generation language.
I think maybe if there's a problem, you'd need to be able to track it back to the specific area where it was made. And since each one is different, it would be hard to figure out what went wrong.
All right, thank you. Now, what if you get promoted or you get fired or you leave? What's going to happen inside the organization?
You're not going to have the knowledge to use your
Right,
file.
right. Yeah, or it might not even know where to find it, right? What if it's on your own PC and not like in SharePoint, or it's not in a shared folder? Some employees actually keep their own spreadsheets secret, all right, and they don't even share them with their colleagues. I've seen this in organizations. So they have their own way of doing things, and they've made up this Excel spreadsheet to do what they want it to do, but nobody else knows about it. So you have to make sure that when you are if you are going to be using end user development, that probably multiple users are going to work together on developing it, or if you've developed it, that you're sharing it with your colleagues or your boss so that they're aware of what you're doing. And also, so they know that this is something you need to do in order to be able to fill the requirements of your job and the requests that they're making of you. Okay, because if they don't know that you have to spend like 2 to 3 hours a week on your own end user development to be able to get your job done, then they may place unreasonable expectations on you or give you more tasks that they want you to do. Okay. All right. And what else is most likely that none of you are going to do, or none of us are going to do, if we're writing up or creating our own Excel macro and spreadsheet? What is something we're probably not likely to do? I talked about it right at the beginning of class.
Document what we're doing.
Document. That's right. Now, is anybody out there, Donna or anyone else, have you got Excel spreadsheets at your job that no one else knows about? Or not that this is a secret, but that no one knows how to use, or that you have, but there's no documentation?
They wouldn't be able to collect the data and do it in the way that I've done it without fully explaining how to pull the data in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Right. So there's an organizational risk, right, with that, because if Donna decides to leave her job and nobody else knows how to do what she did using those end user applications, then there is an organizational risk that the continuity is going to be lost, the knowledge will be lost, and it will have to be, all built back up again. Okay. All right. What else do we need to cover on the end user development? I think I might have talked about most of that. All right. So here's a schematic about the end user development. Okay, so one of the good things about end user development, because I just talked mostly about the negative aspects, or I should say not the negative, but like all the risks that it would be associated with it. So one of the things that that is good about end user development in terms of itself is that usually the only thing you're ever doing is pulling information from the databases. All right, so end users, for the most part, and correct me if you guys have done this otherwise, but most times end users are just extracting databases or information and to develop reports, or like to do reconciliations and stuff with system, pulling the data out, and not uploading or changing data by pushing information up into the databases. Okay, so that's one of the good things about it, or low risk, is that it's not going to impact the databases where all of the CRM, SCM, ERP applications are being used, because the information is just being pulled down and being used and being developed by the user. Now, sometimes in the end user, you have to develop these applications. You may have someone else in your organization that helps you develop these reports. Like if you need to write an SQL, then maybe somebody with the expertise is going to be there to assist you to help you build or develop your Excel spreadsheet or your macro or using Access in an organization. And that's usually only happens though, is because upper management or your manager knows that you don't have the software tools or the applications that are in here don't give you the information in a way that's useful to you or to your manager. Okay. All right. Let's see. These are just some of the categories of the 4th generation languages. Just know that these exist. I've done a lot of report generator stuff in my time. I don't do it anymore. All right, let's see here. So let's just look at I want my slide here. All right, so end user development. So we talked a bit about that. So some of the advantages again, users control the systems and the building, saves development time and cost because we're not doing a big application, or you might have the expertise to be able to do it on your own. And also too, reduces application backlog. So I don't know how many of you have worked in large organizations and worked with applications where you have asked for enhancements or modifications in systems, but it can take a very long time. It might be a year before they might even get back to you, especially in-house. Even sometimes with a vendor, your request might not be considered a high priority. So what ends up happening is that you're like, you know what, I'm going to just create my own reporting and pull the data because I know how to do it myself, because it takes too long to get the vendor or your in-house software application or IT department to respond to your request. Okay. All right. And again, I just talked about this disadvantages can lead to a proliferation of uncontrolled information systems, and they do not always meet quality assurance standards. So talked about like the data, if you're not aware of the data extraction, or if you are not familiar with how to extract data properly, it could end up creating more problems than it is going to solve. Okay. All right. Have we covered off the in-house? I think so. Let's just have a quick look up there. Yep. All right. I'm happy with that. All right. Now let's move down. I want to, sorry here. Don't get dizzy. I'm just going to copy this down. Do, 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 do. All right. So now we've just covered all of the different solution options in terms of being in-house. Okay. Now let's look at some of the outsourcing options or solution options that we might be able to use. Because I will tell you now that most in-house computing, most software applications now are usually outsourced. The large organizations are becoming more complex. More of them are using outsourcing their software applications, even a lot of their IT services, because they're finding that a lot of the applications that are out there are usually fairly standardized, or there's something that is industry specific, and there's probably a software application out there being created for the industry that you're in that you're able to buy from a vendor. Okay, so while in-house is an option, it's becoming less of a choice inside of organizations. Excuse me. All right. So let's look at first thing. Let's just look at it as is. Okay. How do we buy a software package? How do we do it? So what's one of the first things that you want to do? If you're deciding that if you've decided in here that you need an IS system and you're going to outsource it, what's one of the first things that you're probably going to have to do in order to determine what way or method you're going to be outsourcing? What do you need to know or identify?
The requirements.
Sorry, there was an overlap there. Go ahead. Patrick or Tara?
Yeah, you want to know what you need it for.
Yeah, you want to know what you need. What are your critical needs? All right. So how come you've identified that you need a new software application? Okay. So what you want to make sure, first of all, if you're going to be outsourcing, you want to identify what are your critical needs. Okay. Now, so you have to identify all of your critical needs. And how are you going to do that? So
Like check with the
who's,
users and
yeah,
like
okay,
see
the
what
users. So we want to include the users. Who else might be helpful in deciding what your critical needs are? Where most likely is the direction going to come from, or the approval for an outside application purchase, or the demand or the need for it inside an organization? Where's that going to come from? Users don't really get to decide that we need a new application on their own. They are part of the process in determining maybe what your needs are, but who's directing that this needs to happen?
Executives.
Executives. All right. So, over time, maybe your application that you have up here, right, you're identifying it doesn't meet your needs. Remember, what is the originating problem? Okay. So if your growth requirements are changing, if the systems are no longer useful because you've changed your processes inside of your organization, most likely the decision is going to come from the executive level, okay, to decide to approve a budget for the outsourcing, or even if it was in-house, they still have to approve and direct the approval, if you will, of the decision to purchase an outside application. Now, once they've given that approval, then you have to go out there. Let's pretend you're like the part of the executive, or you're one of the executives who's charged with the sponsorship of a project. Okay, you're going to have to start identifying your critical needs. Okay, so let's say we have, I think I've created a little slide down here. All right, so let's say we have identified what are critical needs. So we could have 1, 2, 3, up to 20, 30, 40, 50 different critical needs, depending on the size of the application and what features that we want it to have. Okay. Now, the other thing is what would be nice to have. All right. So you can identify all the things that you must have. Okay. Critical needs, like your must haves. All right. And then you down here, what would be your nice to haves? Okay. Okay. So now what would be the next process that you would be doing? Does anybody out there have any experience with RFPs? Does anybody know what an RFP stands for?
Oh, I know it's to, like when we do it, we're bidding against other organizations for
Right.
a contract.
Yep.
I just
Yep.
can't remember what the acronym
Yeah,
stands
that's
for.
okay. So it's referred to as a request for proposal. All right. So what has to happen is that the organization has to decide or come up with a list of what all of their critical needs are. And at the same time, a lot of the users, when they're involved, they're going to be telling you features that they would like to have in the application. And as a group together, you have to identify what is critical and then what will be the nice to haves. Okay. So the next step in the process is that you're going to develop a request for proposal. So your RFP is going to include all of the critical needs. It might include some of your nice to haves, but the most important part is that it has to have all of the critical needs that you need, like certain features, what you want the application to do, how you want it to process it. Okay. Now, if you're going to have a request for proposal, where is that going to go? What are you going to do with that RFP? Where are you going to send it? Remember, this is outsourcing. It's not in-house. Has anybody out there bought a new car yet or bought a car? I'm being facetious. I know some of you have, but I want to just ask you, what did you do when you decided to purchase a new car? Did you just
Went for a
go like,
test drive.
did you go
Test
right to
drive.
Ford and get the Ford Focus, bought it and left the lot?
You're testing it.
Okay, that's one of the things you want to do. Okay, so if you're going to buy a car, do you know what are one of the things like, should I go to Subaru? Should I go to Ford? Should I go to maybe I have enough money to buy a Beamer, right? Or a Mercedes Benz, right? So one of the things, first of all, is you need to know what is you have to have a budget, okay? How much is it going to cost, or how much do you have for a budget to be able to buy or this outsourcing of this application? So you need to identify the vendors, all right, through research that are able to provide a software application that are going to meet most of your critical needs. Okay. Now, let's say you send it out to 4 or 5 different vendors that are going to bid on the work that would be involved in providing this software application to you. So do you think that all 4 or 5 vendors are going to meet all of your critical needs?
No.
Probably not. All right. So let's just say that we have like 5 vendors and, you know, one of them, let's say vendor A, you know, it doesn't meet 2 of the needs. Vendor B doesn't meet 3. Vendor C doesn't meet 1. Or vendors D and E all have the same, they meet all of the critical needs, right? So if D and E meet all of your critical needs, but A, B, and C, each one of them don't meet one of the critical needs, albeit different ones. So you're down to, if D and E are the ones that are able to meet most of your critical needs, what then might you factor into your decision in terms of choosing vendor D or vendor E for your vendor, besides some other factors we're going to get into, but based on the screen you're seeing right now?
The nice to haves.
The nice to haves. All right. So if we get a vendor or 2 vendors or 3 vendors, and they're able to all provide all of their critical needs or our requirements that we have of a software application, then the only other basis we have, the basis that we have in terms of the features, is we want to look at what are the nice to haves. Okay. So a lot of times features such as, you know, like I've talked about for colored fields or, you know, different kinds of little features that are quite pretty and helpful. They don't necessarily aren't critical, but they're just nice to have in the software because you know, they're pretty and they're colorful, that kind of thing. Okay, so we want to look at what are our nice to have. So if we have vendor D and E and they meet all our critical needs, then we might want to look at what are our nice to haves and what are vendor D and vendor E able to provide in terms of the nice to haves. Okay. All right, so let's say that we've got it down to D and E, or we've decided, hey, we're going with E because E is also has most of our nice to haves, or they've given us twice as many as D will provide. Getting back to the car analogy, what is one of the things if you do to go, let's say you are going to go and buy a Ford Focus. Are you just going to go buy it and take it off the lot and bring it home? How about a bicycle? Do you just go buy a bike and take it? Car, truck? What's something that you might do?
I
Even
think
if you're
like
going for,
Oh, sorry. I think what Donna was mentioning earlier as well, like take it for a test drive, see if you
Take it
like
for a
it.
test drive. So in terms of software is you want to take a demo or you want to have a demo of the software application. All right. So you want to get a demo of the software application from the vendor. Okay. And who might you want to include in the demo? Who are some of the important people?
The users.
The users. All right. Those gotta love those users. All right. So you want the users in the demo. Okay. So the vendors are going to be doing the demonstrations. You need them in the room when the demonstration is happening so that they can identify if there are any issues with the processing of those applications in terms of how your own processes work inside of your organization. All right. What's something else that you might do in terms of choosing whether you're going to go with a certain vendor? What might you ask them for? What do people ask you for when you go and go and apply for a job?
How much you want to be paid?
That's a good one. Yeah, I left it
References.
open-ended, so fair answer. Yeah.
References.
References. All right. So you were going to ask for references or testimonials from other vendors, because if you're spending like 5, 10, $100 million on a new software application, you don't want to just spend that money without getting any references or checking testimonials of other customers of that vendor who are using those software applications. Now, what do you think your vendor is most likely? What kind of references or other customers of that vendor, which ones do you think they're going to choose to give to you?
They're best ones.
Right. They're going to give the best ones, the ones that are enjoying the software the most, that have had the least issues, that seem to be the most satisfied. All right. So you have to be wary of the references that they're giving you. So you may want to also do your own research and find out other customers that have also bought the application. So maybe you want to give them a phone call, send them an email and ask them about their experience, right? Or you may even say to the vendor, hey, I know this other customer is using it. How come they're not on the reference list? And call them on it. Okay. All right. And let's see. Okay, one other factor. If there's a lot of, I said, talked about earlier, there's like thousands, if you will, or at least 1,000 software applications out there. Okay. So what are one of the things that you want to look for in a vendor in terms of ensuring that they're going to be around? Do you want to buy a software application and the vendor like goes bankrupt in 3 years? No. All right.
That's a no.
Right. So you're hoping that that vendor is going to be around. So one of the other things that you want to do is that you want to ensure vendor stability. You want to make sure that what is their history? How long have they been around? Have a look at their financial statements. All right. Have a look at the notes in the financial statements to see if there are any issues that might be concerning to you in terms of, the way some of the numbers are being reported. All right. Because you don't want to choose a vendor that is going to go bankrupt in a few years from now, right? Because that's going to be on you for not having done your due diligence in your vendor selection, all right? Okay, oh my goodness, we're running out of time. Only got 9 minutes left. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to touch on the next one, modifying a software application. Okay. All right. So what are some of the issues that you might run into? So this is first of all, modifying an application. So first of all, I was talking about buying it as is, all right, off the shelf. Now, the next thing you might be able to do is buy that same application, but you want to modify it to fit some of your own processes, okay? So what are some of the issues we might run into if we modify the software, if we change the application?
We didn't build the application, so do we even understand how we're gonna make those changes?
Yep. Now, in respect of these changes, we would be asking the vendor to make the modification. So if we, one of the options, of course, is to modify, is to buy it outside, but you
Mhm.
want some modifications done to the software because there's a few processes that don't fit your needs. Okay. So in SAP, there's like a lot of different modules. But maybe one of the modules doesn't fit, maybe like your order entry system or your customer relationship management. You want a few modifications in order to be able to use it for the processes in your organization. Okay? So one of the first things you want to make sure is, are you able to get this? Are you able to, or are they able to have access to the source code? Okay. And then to Donna's point, what if you decide to buy the software application and use your own in-house IT people to do the modifications? So I'll give you a hint. What's going to happen when there's a new release of this software application 1 or 2 years from now? What is one of the things that you're going to have to manage?
Any changes that were made?
Yeah. So if you have made changes, okay, to your software applications that you've purchased, right? And there's a new release in a year or 2 from now, and you're like, oh, I want those really new enhanced features. Maybe there's like a lot of software application, graphical user interfaces, or a lot of nice features that you wanted at the time when you bought it 2 or 3 years ago, and now they have them. So one of the complications that are going to occur is that if you've done some modifications on your own, or if you've asked the vendor to do some of the modifications, you won't be able to easily move to the new release of the new software application, because you have to make sure that all of those modifications are either done again in the new release, or there's a way for you to bring over the modifications into the new release that is a little more seamless than having to redo them all over again. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we can talk about. All right, so let's look at some advantages and disadvantages of software applications. Okay, so some of the advantages: the design, the programming, the installation, and the maintenance work is reduced because you know, you're not using your in-house staff if you're going to be buying this software application. Right, can save time and cost when developing common business applications, and reduces the need for internal information resources. Okay? However, there are some disadvantages. All right, it may not meet the organization's unique requirements. Okay, so again, if you might also, not only may it not meet all of your critical needs, maybe your processes might even evolve after you've purchased it in the next 2 to 5 years, and it may not be as useful anymore as when you first purchased it. Okay. The other thing is, it might not perform all of the business functions really well. So a lot of times what happens with software applications that you're buying from outside from a vendor, there is some, how should I say, some acceptance that it doesn't do everything that you would like it to do. All right. However, you've been given a mandate and a budget to go out there and get a new application. So you may have to sacrifice getting all of the features that you want by accepting getting some of the features that you can't get, but you're going to get the product implemented like in 6 months instead of a year. Okay. All right. And what else? Again, I just talked about this extensive customization, which means changes and enhancements in the software are going to raise your development costs with regards to the purchase of that application. Okay, let's see. I think we have covered most of this. Oh, the only other thing I just want to touch on is the cloud. So off-the-shelf packages. So can you give me some examples of cloud applications?
Like Azure?
Azure, yep. Anything, anyone else? What other applications are on the cloud?
Office 365.
Yep, it can be on the cloud. Anybody use Sage 50 out there? Nobody's used Sage 50? Not even as a student?
I don't think I've even heard of that.
All right. So you're obviously not in my 3350 class. So I know that some of you are. Oh, there's some people responding in the chat room. I have in one of my accounting classes. Yep. Okay. Victoria's, Maria, of course. All right. So I'm just asking because I was hoping that that would be familiar to a lot of you. But if you haven't done 3350 yet or some other accounting courses in the intermediate level, you may not have used Sage 50. Or if you did them in past years, you may not have had a lab in your accounting course, but that's evolved at St. Mary's University because we are recognizing the need to have accountants who actually know how to use the applications. All right. So in terms of like Sage 50, there's a Sage 300 product that they have in the cloud. So there's another example of a cloud application. So we have learned about cloud applications in previous chapters in this course. All right. And we've learned some of the risks and the benefits of using cloud applications. So a lot of applications that you can buy from vendors, they don't have to be in the cloud, but a lot of them now are moving to the cloud or are already in the cloud, or some of them actually only use the cloud and do not use your own hard drives, maybe in your own facility. So when I'm referring to the cloud applications here, I'm talking about other applications that already are options, but it's just that you can either have the option of maybe having them in the cloud. And if you know what the features or the benefits are of using cloud computing, versus not using it, then that would be a factor in your decision about your purchase for the off-the-shelf package. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave contract development for another day, but we've covered everything. I think particularly everything you're going to need in terms of the advantages and disadvantages and pros and cons to finish up that assignment today. Right. Just kidding here, but you'd have until Saturday to get the last assignment in. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, complaints that you would like to express at this time? No. Okay, so don't leave yet. I need to get a picture because we didn't have breakout rooms today. It's my only way. Second here, my camera app is not working. Don't leave me yet. We got 2 more minutes. All right. There we go. All right, good. Okay, well, if there are no comments or questions or anything like that, good luck with finishing your last assignment. And of course, getting the rest of your assignments done this week. I know it's a pretty stressful time. And hopefully next week, you'll get some more information about what to expect in terms of preparation for your final exam. And that'll reduce some of the anxiety you have about some of your courses, and hopefully some of your other profs are going to do the same thing. All right, have a great evening, and I will see you all on Monday. Bye. All right, so that ends the class for ACCT 3323 MIS for Wednesday, December 1, and the time is 5:14 Atlantic. Bye.